Hello, hello, hello. I'm Axel Cannon, and this is Stupid Game Experiments. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a scenario that every game developer has experienced at some point in their career. You're working on a game, and it's probably the greatest game ever created. It's a combination of Dark Souls, Animal Crossing, and an anime dating simulator. It's so immersive, it's like being in the Matrix, except without that whole having a giant needle stuck in your brain part. You're getting close to releasing your game, and you just know the entire world is going to be playing it. Literally the entire world. Babies, coma patients, everyone is going to play this game. And then disaster strikes. Maybe your computer crashes. Maybe your game project files get corrupted. Maybe you visit a dodgy porn site and download a virus that melts your computer because you didn't give them enough Dogecoin before the deadline. Whatever the cause, your entire game is gone, lost forever, never to be seen again. Of course you try to start over from scratch, but the magic is gone. Nothing you create works as well as it did originally. The controls are janky, the artwork looks like something your dog puked up, the sound effects make you want to shove an ice pick in your ear. Not a single thing works right. You quickly devolve into becoming a raging alcoholic. You get fired from your day job after mistaking your boss's desk for a urinal. Your wife leaves you for your best friend, who released a Flappy Bird clone that went viral and is raking in the AdSense revenue. And you end up on the street yelling at pedestrians about how they're not worthy to have played the amazing game you once created. I'm sure this all sounds completely familiar to everyone listening to this. Every game developer past their first game jam has had this exact experience. However, today, I'm going to tell you how to make sure that this situation never happens to you again. All it requires is some black magic, a blood pact with Satan, and this little known technology called version control. Version control is one of those game development things that everybody should do, but nobody ever does. Sort of like paying your taxes or getting a prostate exam. If you never heard of version control, it provides three main benefits to your development. First, it's like a permanent undo button for your entire project. Any save state you create for the project can be rolled back to at any time forever. Second, it provides a backup for your project. Version control is almost always maintained on a remote server that maintains a complete copy of all the necessary files for your project. In this video, I'm going to specifically be talking about GitHub, since that's what most indie developers will use on their projects. The final main benefit of version control is it makes working in teams a lot easier. It allows everyone in the team to access the files for the project from the remote server, and it allows you to track what changes have been made to the project and who made them. If you're a solo developer, this may not seem as important. However, once you have this tool in your toolbox, you might start finding ways to put it to use. Now that I've convinced you that version control is basically more necessary than oxygen on Mars, let's talk about how version control, specifically Git and GitHub, works in the three main game engines, Unity, Unreal, and Godot. This isn't going to be a how-to guide for all three game engines. There are plenty of those out there that you can check out for whatever game engine you're using. All I'm going to do in this video is compare my experience using Git with each of the game engines. The first thing you need to know is that none of the game engines will really handle version control through Git on their own. Unreal Engine comes the closest to this for reasons I'll explain in a minute, but for the most part, you're still going to have to install Git and a secondary application to handle pushing your changes to a remote server. If you're going to use GitHub as your remote server, I'd suggest just using the GitHub desktop application. It's free, and because it's created by GitHub, it integrates well with their servers. As for version control integration into the individual game engines, it breaks down almost exactly as you would expect. As I mentioned earlier, version control is most tightly integrated into Unreal Engine. In fact, it comes with the engine by default out of the box, and it works with multiple different version control systems besides just Git. This isn't surprising since Unreal Engine is the most feature-rich engine of the three, and it's built for AAA studios, which will have large teams and version control standard practices already in place. Unreal Engine also needed to add extra support for version control because it relies so heavily on visual scripting. As I said, one of the benefits of version control is to be able to track every change you've made to your program and who made it. Well, that's fairly easy to do when you're using text files, and there's already plenty of functionality built into Git to handle that kind of situation. However, that same level of functionality doesn't exist for binary files or visual scripting languages. Therefore, Unreal had to add the ability to visualize these changes directly to the Unreal Engine. This is something to keep in mind when using version control and visual scripting languages in Unity and Godot. I haven't used visual scripting languages in either of those engines yet, but I'd be surprised if similar functionality exists for either of them, since neither one has much version control support out of the box. Unity does support 2 other version control systems out of the box, but doesn't support Git. As is standard for Unity, when the engine doesn't support something, you can usually find it in the asset store. There are several plugins that add Git support to the engine. Several of these are paid versions that probably add a bunch of functionality to Unity, but honestly, I just use the GitHub plugin that's free. It's 2 years old and doesn't add a lot of functionality directly to Unity, but combined with the GitHub desktop application, it does everything that you're most likely going to need it to do. And finally, as is typical for Godot, it doesn't have Git functionality out of the box either, but it does have an open source plugin that is officially supported by the Godot project. It works much like the GitHub plugin for Unity, and again, if you combine it with the GitHub desktop app, it should do everything you need it to do. The main downside to these plugins for Godot and Unity is that you need to add them to your project every time. In the case of Unity, that just means going to the package manager and adding it. In the case of Godot, it means unzipping the plugin and pasting the files into your project. This is kind of a pain, but there are a couple of advantages to using version control directly from your game engine. The first is that they will all create what are called git ignore files. Basically, there are files in your projects for all 3 game engines that you either don't want or don't need to be backed up to your remote version control server. The git ignore file, as the name implies, tells Git to ignore those files when backing up files to the server, and having the engine auto-generate it for you is very convenient. Secondly, Git and the game engines generally want to create their projects in empty folders. This means there is a conflict when trying to create a project in the folder that the other program has already created a project in. To get around this, you normally have to create your Git project first, and then create your game project in a subfolder. This can be kind of a pain, especially if you're trying to add version control to an existing project. However, if you create a Git project directly in the engine, it will just add the Git files to your existing project. You can then use the GitHub desktop app to publish the project directly to GitHub. This is part of the reason why I recommend using the GitHub desktop app. I know I covered all of this pretty quickly, but as I said, there are a ton of tutorials out there that can walk you through step by step how to set up Git for your game engine of choice. However, if you do have any questions about anything I covered, feel free to post those down in the comments. While you're down there, you should also take the opportunity to give this video either a thumbs up or a thumbs down, depending on what you thought of it. Either way, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.